I attended an elegant function with my husband. He departed with a different woman because she's wealthy. He hurled his wallet toward me and smirked. Call yourself an Uber. By dawn, his cell wouldn't quit buzzing. His affair partner was weeping, and he remained motionless at the entrance, grasping something he never anticipated. For 17 years, I convinced myself that matrimony demands flexibility, that not every insult warrants retaliation, that preserving harmony is more valuable than protecting dignity. I convinced myself of these concepts while my husband systematically removed me from his corporate existence, presented me as someone who manages paperwork instead of someone who operates a thriving advisory firm, and drained our kids' education savings on sweet rentals with a woman whose relatives controlled half of Westchester. I am Diana Morrison, 44 years old, and I am exceptionally skilled at deceiving myself when reality is too painful to acknowledge. Before we proceed, I want to express gratitude for joining me in sharing these accounts of self-respect restored and consequences delivered. If you believe that deception deserves repercussions, please consider subscribing. It helps us connect with more individuals who need to witness this. Now let's observe how this develops. My expertise is financial reorganization for small enterprises on the edge of failure. Companies contract me when their revenue statements don't align with their account balances, when capital vanishes into discrepancies they cannot clarify, when they suspect someone is embezzling but need evidence. I examine their records with clinical accuracy, pinpointing exactly where resources are being siphoned and why their fiscal framework no longer sustains their activities. I am outstanding at this profession because I comprehend how individuals conceal theft behind seemingly legitimate transactions, how they manipulate confidence to establish reasonable doubt, how they persuade themselves that what they're doing isn't truly unethical if nobody detects it. The paradox is almost amusing. I can identify financial dishonesty in a business ledger within hours, but I overlooked it in my own marriage for 20 months. My husband, Nathan, markets premium automobiles to affluent customers who consider $80,000 vehicles as sensible acquisitions. He is captivating in that rehearsed manner that convinces people they are exceptional, that their bond with him is distinctive, that he authentically values their contentment rather than his earnings. He has been employing these identical techniques on me for years, and I permitted him because the alternative was confessing that the existence I constructed was built on foundations that were never as secure as I assumed. Tuesday evening. He entered my workspace and informed me I needed to accompany him to his showroom's milestone celebration on Saturday. After 4 years of eliminating me from his professional sphere, this abrupt demand should have activated every warning mechanism in my consciousness. It did activate them. I just disregarded the signals because I had become exceptionally proficient at pretending everything was acceptable. 2 days afterward, I stood in a parking structure at midnight gripping a wallet my husband had launched at my torso, observing him depart with another woman. And I finally ceased deceiving myself about what my marriage had transformed into. But I'm advancing too rapidly. To comprehend how I arrived in that parking structure, you need to comprehend what I was before that instant. You need to perceive the existence I convinced myself was worth safeguarding, even as it gradually contaminated everything I encountered. My residence in suburban New York appears like it belongs in an architectural publication. Stone walkway that Nathan insisted on constructing 6 years ago because accomplished individuals have stone walkways. Roses that flourish dependably every spring because I investigated the appropriate soil mixture and nourishment regimen and adhered to the guidelines with the same exactness I implemented to financial records. Interior surfaces painted in trendy muted shades that Nathan chose to impress the associates he occasionally transported home for beverages before he ceased bringing anyone home whatsoever. Everything selected, everything deliberate, everything engineered to display an impression of steadiness and accomplishment that had nothing to do with the circumstances occurring inside those meticulously painted surfaces. Our daughter Sophie is 16, intelligent in that reserved manner that frequently gets disregarded in a society that compensates volume over substance. She observes everything with deep eyes that overlook nothing, absorbing data and formulating judgments she keeps secured behind a cautious facade of adolescent detachment. 3 months ago, she questioned me why Dad doesn't share meals with us anymore. I provided her the conventional clarification about his rigorous work timetable, about significant clients who demanded evening focus, about how accomplished individuals sometimes must sacrifice household time for career commitments. She regarded me with an expression that was far too perceptive for a 16-year-old and stated nothing, which somehow felt more devastating than if she had disputed my deceptions directly. Her quietness was condemnation. Her quietness was comprehension that I was defending a fantasy neither of us accepted anymore. Our son, Marcus, is 13, still accessible and demonstrative in manners that boys his age are starting to abandon under societal pressure to appear resilient and unaffected. He embraces me when he returns from school and describes his day with passionate specifics about cafeteria exchanges and athletic field dynamics, and the novel his instructor is presenting, aloud during independent time. 4 weeks ago, he questioned why Mom and Dad don't chuckle together like his companion Tyler's parents do. I informed him that grown-ups just become more subdued as they mature, that it's standard and nothing to concern about, that affection transforms configuration over duration, but remains constant underneath the surface modifications. The statements tasted like toxin in my mouth even as I articulated them. My parents have been married 50 years and still clasp hands when they navigate through the supermarket. They still complete each other's statements and exchange intimate humor, and regard each other like they're perceiving something valuable that nobody else can entirely appreciate. I understand what an authentic alliance appears like. I understand what lasting devotion feels like when it's sincere rather than staged. And I understand with complete conviction that what Nathan and I possess is not that, and has not been that for longer than I desire to calculate. But acknowledging that reality meant recognizing that I had squandered 17 years, constructing something that was already disintegrating beneath me. It meant accepting that I had been so concentrated on sustaining the facade of achievement that I had dismissed the structural breakdowns threatening to demolish everything. It meant confronting the circumstances that I had become precisely like the declining businesses I advise for, the ones that keep functioning long past the stage when any rational evaluation would suggest termination, the ones that grasp to previous achievement while dismissing present catastrophe. The transformation in Nathan's conduct occurred so incrementally that I could persuade myself I was fabricating the modifications. 4 years ago, he ceased inviting me to showroom functions. He maintained I made his associates uncomfortable with my frank inquiries about revenue methods and commission frameworks, that the premium automotive realm demanded a social competency I simply didn't command, that my inclination toward direct communication conflicted with the delicate choreography of luxury sales. I embraced this rationale because it corresponded with how I perceived myself. I am more at ease with data than social gatherings. I'm more comfortable examining financial documents than navigating cocktail dialogue. I comprehend numerical patterns better than interpersonal subtleties. This assessment wasn't completely inaccurate, but it also wasn't the authentic explanation Nathan ceased including me in his career. The authentic explanation, which I would eventually uncover through financial documentation that couldn't fabricate or perform or conceal behind charming rationalizations, was that Nathan had initiated an affair with a customer, a woman named Victoria Ashford, whose family fortune originated from property development throughout the tri-state area. A woman who acquired a new vehicle every 18 months regardless of whether her existing one required replacement, because individuals with that degree of prosperity view automobiles as interchangeable accessories rather than substantial acquisitions. A woman who appreciated the focus Nathan provided during these transactions and determined she desired that focus to extend beyond professional discussions about vehicle specifications and financing alternatives. Nathan encountered Victoria 2.5 years ago when she entered his showroom interested in a limited edition model that cost more than most individuals earn annually. He devoted 3 hours with her that afternoon, organizing a test drive through scenic routes he reserved for his most lucrative customers, clarifying features with the attentiveness he previously directed toward me during our courtship, constructing the variety of connection that transforms a vehicle purchase into an intimate encounter. By evening, he had secured the transaction. By the subsequent week, he had secured something else entirely. I didn't suspect anything initially. Nathan frequently worked extended hours, frequently had client suppers that necessitated evening unavailability, frequently returned home exhausted and distracted in manners that appeared completely reasonable for someone in competitive luxury sales. The profession demands continuous relationship cultivation. The profession demands making yourself accessible when clients desire focus. The profession demands prioritizing customer contentment over personal convenience. I comprehended this because Nathan had clarified it thoroughly when we initially married. When I was still attempting to comprehend the realm he occupied and the expectations it positioned on his schedule. What I didn't comprehend was that Nathan had become exceptionally skilled at exploiting my confidence in his professional commitments to construct a fully separate existence with another woman, an existence financed partially through funds he was embezzling from accounts I believed were designated for our children's educational future, An existence that involved suite rentals at luxury, accommodations where Victoria could visit him without jeopardizing her own carefully sustained public image as a devoted patron of charitable organizations and cultured institutions. An existence that required Nathan to systematically eliminate me from any circumstances where I might encounter individuals who knew about his affair, which meant excluding me from every showroom function, every industry celebration, every social opportunity where his professional and personal realms might converge. The exclusion injured more than I acknowledged even to myself. I convinced myself it was rational, that Nathan was safeguarding me from awkward social circumstances I wouldn't appreciate anyway, that his associates were superficial individuals I had no interest in understanding. But underneath those rationalizations existed the reality I refused to confront. Being excluded from someone's professional existence communicates that you're not adequate to display, that your presence generates embarrassment rather than pride, that the connection you believe you share isn't substantial enough to withstand public examination. Nathan was informing me through his actions that I had become something to conceal rather than someone to showcase. And I accepted this message without protest, because questioning it would have demanded, acknowledging how completely our marriage had deteriorated. The financial deception commenced approximately the same period as the affair, though I wouldn't establish this correlation until considerably later, when I possessed all the documentation arranged chronologically and could observe the pattern materialize. Nathan had always managed our joint accounts. This seemed rational when we initially married because his revenue from commissions was unpredictable and demanded careful oversight to guarantee we could satisfy our commitments during slower months. I contributed my earnings to our shared finances and trusted Nathan to allocate everything appropriately. I trusted him because matrimony allegedly operates on confidence, because companions supposedly collaborate toward mutual objectives, because I was too occupied constructing my own career to scrutinize every financial choice Nathan executed. This confidence, which I had considered a testament to our partnership's resilience, was actually the vulnerability Nathan manipulated to finance his affair while simultaneously depleting our children's prospects. The mechanics were remarkably straightforward once I comprehended what to seek. Nathan had established a separate account I didn't know existed, registered under his name exclusively, utilizing our residence address, but diverting all correspondence to a mailbox at the showroom, where I would never accidentally encounter it. Each month, he transferred funds from our joint savings into this concealed account, not substantial enough amounts to activate obvious warnings, but adequate to accumulate into considerable sums over months of sustained transfers. He disguised these transfers behind legitimate-appearing justifications. Investment opportunities that demanded rapid action, emergency repairs for property we possessed that I never witnessed invoices for, tax obligations that somehow never corresponded to our actual filings. Each rationale was reasonable enough independently. Combined across 20 months, they constituted systematic theft. The concealed account financed everything Nathan didn't desire me knowing about. Suite rentals at the Grandview Plaza where Victoria would encounter him twice weekly. Jewelry acquisitions that never reached me, but that I would eventually discover photographs of Victoria displaying on her social platforms. Restaurant charges at establishments we had never visited together. Each expenditure was a fragment of our children's prospects being converted into temporary pleasure for two individuals who had determined their desires mattered more than their commitments. By the time I uncovered this account, Nathan had diverted nearly $175,000 from savings we had accumulated over 14 years. Capital that should have ensured Sophie and Marcus could attend quality universities without drowning in debt. Capital that represented sacrifice and planning and dedication to our children's prospects. Capital that Nathan had essentially stolen to finance an affair he convinced himself he merited because his wife wasn't sufficiently interesting or appealing or accommodating. That Tuesday evening when Nathan informed me I needed to accompany him to the showroom celebration, I should have immediately questioned his intentions. 4 years of exclusion from his professional existence, then abrupt insistence I attend this particular function. The transformation didn't make logical sense unless you comprehended what I didn't yet know. Victoria would be attending this celebration. Her family's enterprise was one of the showroom's largest commercial customers, acquiring entire fleets of premium vehicles for their management personnel. Her attendance was anticipated. Her presence was essentially mandatory given her family's financial significance to the showroom. And Nathan had determined that the most effective approach to conclude our marriage was to humiliate me so thoroughly in front of witnesses that I would become too mortified. To contest whatever divorce conditions he suggested, He was orchestrating my public disposal. He was engineering a scenario where I would be so devastated, so desperate to escape the humiliation, that I would accept whatever settlement he proposed just to conclude the ordeal rapidly. He assumed I would prioritize avoiding additional embarrassment over defending my entitlements. He assumed shame would override anger. He assumed I would behave like the compliant, unassertive wife he had gradually molded me into becoming over years of subtle manipulation and systematic exclusion. This assumption would prove to be remarkably costly, but I'm still advancing ahead of the chronology. To comprehend why Nathan's strategy failed so catastrophically, you need to understand what transpired that Saturday evening at the showroom celebration. You need to perceive exactly how Nathan anticipated his plan would develop, and precisely why his assessment of my personality was so drastically incorrect. Saturday afternoon, I devoted 3 hours preparing for this function I hadn't desired to attend. I selected a navy dress that Nathan had previously complimented, classic and refined without attempting to compete with the designer fashion I knew would dominate the celebration. I arranged my hair the manner Nathan preferred, understated and professional rather than excessively styled. I wore the pearl necklace his parents had gifted me on our 10th anniversary, hoping it would signal respect for his family even if Nathan himself no longer appeared interested in displaying that respect toward me. I was still attempting to be the wife he desired, still attempting to justify his decision to suddenly include me in his professional realm, still persuading myself that perhaps this invitation indicated he was ready to reintegrate me into portions of his existence I had been excluded from. The effort I invested in my appearance that afternoon represents how thoroughly I had internalized the notion that Nathan's approval was something I needed to earn rather than something he should automatically provide to his spouse. We arrived at the venue separately because Nathan claimed he needed to be there early to assist with arrangements. This seemed rational. The function was at an exclusive estate that one of the showroom's investors possessed in northern Westchester, the variety of property that has its own designation and appears in architectural publications. I drove myself, navigating through progressively affluent neighborhoods until I reached gates that opened onto grounds that resembled a resort more than a private residence. The circular driveway was already congested with vehicles that each cost more than my annual earnings. I left my sensible sedan between a luxury sports car and an SUV that probably required special licensing to operate, feeling immediately out of place in manners that intensified as I walked toward the entrance. The celebration itself was exactly the variety of function Nathan had claimed I wouldn't appreciate. Approximately 200 individuals scattered throughout rooms designed for entertaining on this magnitude. Everyone impeccably dressed and projecting the variety of casual prosperity that only emerges from genuine wealth. Servers circulated with champagne and sophisticated appetizers. A jazz ensemble performed in one corner. Everything was refined and costly, and carefully orchestrated to impress. I accepted a glass of champagne I didn't desire, and attempted to blend into the surroundings while searching for Nathan among the masses. I located him after several minutes, stationed near the terrace entrance, engaged in animated dialogue with a woman I didn't recognize. She was approximately my age, but maintained herself in the manner that demands substantial financial investment. Salon-perfect hair, designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, jewelry that captured light with the distinctive brilliance of authentic diamonds rather than imitation. She was laughing at something Nathan stated, touching his arm with the variety of casual intimacy that communicates familiarity rather than recent acquaintance. I observed them for perhaps 2 minutes before Nathan noticed me watching. When he did, something transformed in his expression. Not guilt exactly, more like annoyance that I had appeared before he was ready to execute whatever he had planned. He stated something to the woman that made her glance in my direction, then excused himself, and approached where I stood attempting to appear relaxed despite the tension abruptly coiling through my chest. "Diana, you made it," he stated. His tone was pleasant but hollow. The variety of manufactured warmth he probably employed with customers he found irritating, but couldn't afford to offend. "Come meet some individuals." He guided me toward a cluster of his associates, introducing me with the identical phrasing he had employed for years. "This is Diana, she handles bookkeeping. Not this is my wife Diana who operates a successful consulting practice. Not this is Diana who specializes in financial restructuring for struggling enterprises. Just someone who handles bookkeeping. As if my entire professional identity could be reduced to data entry and fundamental arithmetic." I corrected him instinctively. I operate a consulting firm specializing in financial analysis and business restructuring. Nathan's smile tensed slightly. Right, bookkeeping and consulting? Same concept. His dismissal was so casual, so automatic, that I nearly missed the insult embedded in it. But the woman standing beside us, one of Nathan's associate's spouses, registered it. I observed her expression transform from polite curiosity to uncomfortable recognition that she was witnessing something she shouldn't. She shifted the subject rapidly, inquiring about my company and permitting me to clarify what I actually do for several minutes before Nathan interrupted to guide me toward another cluster of individuals. This sequence repeated multiple times over the subsequent hour. Nathan would introduce me with minimal information that understated my professional accomplishments. I would attempt to correct or clarify. Nathan would redirect or minimize. And whoever we were conversing with would become progressively uncomfortable observing this dynamic develop. By the third iteration, I ceased attempting to correct him. By the fourth, I had consumed 3 glasses of champagne on an primarily empty stomach, and was starting to question why Nathan had insisted I attend this function when he obviously didn't desire me there. The answer materialized around 9 o'clock when Nathan approached me near the dessert display, where I had been attempting to appear occupied rather than isolated. "I need to depart," he stated abruptly. "Victoria isn't feeling well and I'm going to drive her home." Victoria, the woman from earlier, the one he had been conversing with when I first located him, the woman who had touched his arm with such casual familiarity, the woman whose name he stated as if I should already know who she was, as if her identity was so evident it didn't require explanation. I blinked at him, processing what he was actually communicating. "You're departing? With another woman? While I'm still here?" Nathan's expression hardened into something I had never witnessed directed at me before. Pure contempt, undisguised and deliberate. "She's a valued customer and she's unwell. I'm guaranteeing she gets home safely. You're a grown woman, Diana. You can find your own way home." He reached into his pocket and extracted his wallet, then hurled it toward me with sufficient force that I had to catch it awkwardly against my chest to prevent it from striking me in the face. "Call yourself an Uber. Use my card if you need to." Then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in a room full of his associates and customers, holding his wallet like it was evidence of something I couldn't yet entirely comprehend. The humiliation was physical. I could feel heat ascending my neck and face, could sense the attention of individuals nearby who had definitely witnessed what just occurred, could hear the abrupt decrease in surrounding discussions as individuals registered the scene Nathan had just generated. I remained motionless for perhaps 30 seconds, too stunned to immediately react, observing Nathan's back as he disappeared through the terrace doors without glancing back. Someone approached me, an older woman I vaguely recognized from earlier introductions. "Are you all right, dear? Do you need assistance?" "I'm fine," I managed to respond, though my voice sounded peculiar even to my own ears. "I just need some air." I walked toward the entrance as steadily as I could manage, conscious of stares tracking my progress, conscious that I had just become the subject of gossip that would circulate through Nathan's professional sphere for weeks. I reached my vehicle in the parking structure and sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, still gripping Nathan's wallet, attempting to process what had just occurred. Nathan had abandoned me at a public function to depart with another woman. He had hurled his wallet at me like I was a servant he was dismissing. He had humiliated me in front of approximately 200 individuals who now possessed a narrative about Nathan Morrison's wife being disposed of for someone superior. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in the instant. This was calculated. Nathan had invited me to this function specifically to execute this scene, to establish a public narrative of me being insufficient and desperate while he moved on to someone more suitable to his aspirations. He was demonstrating to everyone present that he was upgrading, that he had discovered someone better, that I was now irrelevant to his existence. The humiliation he generated wasn't collateral damage. It was the objective. I sat in that parking structure for approximately 20 minutes before the shock started transforming into something more useful. Anger. Not the emotional, uncontrolled variety that leads to regrettable decisions. The cold, analytical variety that permits you to think clearly even when your entire world is collapsing. Nathan had miscalculated catastrophically. He had assumed shame would paralyze me, that I would be too mortified to respond effectively, that the public humiliation would render me compliant and desperate to finalize whatever divorce he proposed as rapidly as possible. What he had actually done was provide me with witnesses to his contempt. Approximately 200 individuals had just observed Nathan Morrison abandon his wife at a public function to depart with another woman. 200 individuals who could verify exactly how Nathan treated me, exactly what his priorities were, exactly how little respect he possessed for our marriage or my dignity. This wasn't merely grounds for divorce. This was documentation of behavior that would demolish him in any legal proceeding. I drove home that evening with Nathan's wallet still on the passenger seat, already formulating a plan. By the time I reached our driveway, I knew exactly what my initial steps would be. Document everything, every witness to tonight's events, every financial irregularity I had dismissed as legitimate over the previous years, every indication that Nathan had been sustaining a separate existence I knew nothing about. I would approach this marriage's conclusion the identical manner I approached failing businesses I consulted for, with clinical detachment, methodical investigation, and absolute commitment to uncovering every instance of fraud and mismanagement. Nathan had just converted our divorce from an emotional ordeal into a professional assignment, and I was exceptionally skilled at my profession. Sunday morning arrived with the variety of brilliant sunshine that feels inappropriately cheerful when your entire existence is imploding. I woke at 6 after perhaps 3 hours of disrupted sleep, immediately conscious of Nathan's absence from the bed beside me. He hadn't returned home. For the first time in 17 years of marriage, my husband had spent the complete evening with another woman, and he hadn't even bothered fabricating an excuse or offering an explanation. The wallet he had hurled at me remained on my nightstand where I had positioned it before attempting to sleep. I lifted it now, opening it to discover exactly what I anticipated. His driver's license, multiple credit cards in his name, nearly $400 in cash, membership cards for exclusive establishments and luxury fitness centers, and tucked behind his insurance card, a room key from the Grandview Plaza, with a handwritten number on the paper sleeve. Room 212. I photographed everything. Every card, every receipt, the room key with its handwritten notation. I documented the wallet's contents with the identical thoroughness I would employ auditing a client's financial records, guaranteeing each image was clear and properly exposed, confirming that dates and numbers were readable. Then I replaced everything exactly as I had discovered it, and positioned the wallet back on the nightstand. Evidence collection had commenced. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Nathan. Staying at hotel for a few days. Need some space to think. We should probably talk about where this is heading. The message's casual tone was almost impressive, as if abandoning your wife at a public function and spending the evening with your mistress was merely a minor disagreement that warranted some reflection time. As if 17 years of marriage could be dismissed with a text message suggesting we should probably talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and commenced research. Victoria Ashford was remarkably easy to investigate. Her social media profiles were public, filled with photographs from charity functions and cultural events and exotic vacations. I scrolled back through months of posts, observing for anything that might connect her to Nathan. I discovered it within 15 minutes. A photograph from 4 months ago, taken at some waterfront restaurant, Victoria smiling at the camera, while someone's hand was visible at the edge of the frame. The hand was wearing a watch I recognized because I had given it to Nathan for our 15th anniversary. Another photograph from 6 weeks ago, this one capturing Victoria at some gallery opening, and in the blurred background was a man who possessed Nathan's build and posture, and distinctive manner of standing with his weight shifted slightly to one side. More photographs. More tiny pieces of evidence that Victoria and Nathan had been appearing in the same locations for months. I preserved every image, constructing a folder on my computer systematically organized by date. Then I initiated examining our financial records with the identical scrutiny I would employ for a client's books. I accessed our joint bank accounts, credit card statements, investment portfolios, everything I possessed login credentials for. What I discovered made my chest constrict with anger so intense I needed to step away from the computer for several minutes to regain composure. The transfers I mentioned earlier, the ones Nathan had explained away as investments and emergencies and tax obligations, they were all there in the records I had access to, but had never bothered scrutinizing closely. Except now I was scrutinizing them. Now I was tracing each transfer to its destination, tracking the patterns, identifying the irregularities that appeared completely obvious once you knew what you were seeking. Nathan had been transferring funds from our joint savings account into what appeared to be an investment account managed by some financial firm I had never heard of. The transfers occurred monthly, amounts varying between $4,000 and $8,000. always scheduled for the identical day our mortgage payment processed, so they would blend into the routine monthly expenditures I expected to observe. Except when I investigated the receiving account more closely, when I actually contacted the alleged investment firm whose name appeared on the transfer records, I discovered something interesting. The firm existed. They managed legitimate investment accounts, but they had no record of any account under Nathan's name or our joint names. The account number appearing on our bank transfers didn't exist in their system. Nathan had established a fraudulent receiving account. He had falsified the transfer documentation to make it appear funds were going toward legitimate investments when they were actually flowing into a separate account I had no access to. This wasn't merely marital deception. This was actual financial fraud, the variety that violated laws beyond just breaking wedding vows. I contacted our bank directly, identifying myself and explaining I needed to verify some recent transfers from our joint account. The representative was helpful, pulling up our account and confirming what I had already suspected. The transfers I was questioning were going to an account registered solely under Nathan's name at a different bank. The account had been established 2 years ago. Nathan had forged my signature on documents authorizing these transfers, claiming I had approved shifting funds toward a higher yield investment opportunity. I have copies of the authorization forms if you need them for your records, the representative offered. Yes, please, I stated, managing to keep my voice steady despite the rage pulsing through me. Please send me copies of everything. Every authorization form Nathan signed, every transfer record, everything you have related to that account. I disconnected the call and sat staring at my computer screen, processing what I had just uncovered. Nathan hadn't just been unfaithful. He had committed actual fraud, forging my signature on banking documents to facilitate theft of joint assets. The authorization forms the bank would send me would include my allegedly signature-approving transfers I had never consented to. That forged signature was evidence of criminal activity, not merely grounds for an unfavorable divorce settlement. Nathan had just converted our marriage's dissolution from a civil matter into potential criminal prosecution. The scope of his miscalculation was becoming more evident. He had assumed I would be too humiliated and compliant to investigate thoroughly. He had assumed I would accept whatever narrative he constructed about our marriage failing and agree to whatever settlement terms he proposed. He had assumed wrong. Monday morning, I contacted my attorney. Julia Westfield had handled the closing on our house 8 years ago, and we had maintained occasional contact since then. She was sharp and experienced, and possessed a reputation for aggressive advocacy when situations warranted it. Julia, I need your guidance on a divorce matter, I stated when she answered. My own divorce. I require someone who comprehends financial fraud and asset concealment because my husband has been systematically stealing from our joint accounts for the past 2 years. There was a brief pause before Julia responded. Come to my office this afternoon. Bring every financial document you possess. And Diana, don't confront your husband about any of this until we've strategized. We met at 2 o'clock. I arrived with my laptop containing all the evidence I had compiled over the previous 36 hours, plus the authorization forms the bank had emailed me that morning featuring my forged signature. Julia reviewed everything in silence, occasionally making notes or requesting clarification on specific transactions. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and regarded me with an expression that blended sympathy with professional satisfaction. He's destroyed himself, she stated flatly. These forged authorization forms constitute bank fraud. The concealed account constitutes asset concealment and potential tax evasion. The systematic transfers from joint funds to finance an extramarital affair constitute dissipation of marital assets. Any reasonable judge will penalize him severely for this conduct. We can pursue both civil remedies through divorce proceedings and potentially criminal charges depending on how aggressively you desire to respond. I considered this for a moment. What's your recommendation? Document everything before he realizes you're investigating, Julia stated. Right now he believes you're too humiliated and shocked to respond effectively. That assumption works in our favor because it means he's not attempting to conceal evidence or move assets. I want you to continue functioning normally. Don't indicate anything has changed, while we construct the most comprehensive case possible. I'll hire a forensic accountant to examine your financial records thoroughly. I'll also recommend a private investigator who specializes in documenting extramarital affairs if you desire photographic evidence of your husband's relationship. The more documentation we gather now, the stronger our position when we file. How long will this take? I asked. Probably 6 to 8 weeks to compile everything properly, Julia replied. I understand that feels lengthy when you're dealing with this situation, but patience now results in considerably better outcomes later. Can you maintain the pretense that nothing has changed for that duration? I thought about Nathan's text message suggesting we should probably talk. I thought about him assuming I would be desperate to finalize this rapidly, too mortified to demand thorough accounting of what he had done. Yes, I stated. I can manage that. Julia smiled, the expression containing no warmth. Excellent. Let's destroy him. The subsequent 6 weeks were among the strangest of my existence. Nathan returned home 3 days after abandoning me at the showroom celebration, behaving as if his absence had been completely reasonable. He didn't apologize for the manner he had treated me. He didn't explain where he had been or who he had been with. He simply resumed occupying space in our home, sleeping in the guest room because he claimed he didn't desire to disturb me with his irregular schedule, avoiding any meaningful conversation about what had occurred. The children noticed the tension immediately. Sophie stopped speaking at meals, observing her father with that penetrating gaze that overlooked nothing. Marcus became quieter, less enthusiastic about sharing details of his day, obviously aware that something had fundamentally shifted, even if he couldn't identify exactly what. I maintained routines as normally as possible, preparing meals and assisting with homework and pretending that nothing had changed, while simultaneously compiling the most comprehensive documentation of marital betrayal and financial fraud that Julia had ever processed. The forensic accountant Julia hired was a woman named Andrea Thornhill, 50-something with 30 years of experience uncovering financial deception in divorce cases. Andrea approached our financial records with the same systematic precision I employed in my own consulting work. And within 2 weeks, she had traced every dollar Nathan had diverted from our joint accounts. The total was more staggering than I had initially calculated: $198,000 over 27 months. Nearly $200,000 that should have secured our children's education, converted instead into hotel rooms and jewelry and restaurant meals and whatever else Nathan had decided he merited. But Andrea discovered something even more significant: the concealed account Nathan had been transferring funds into, the one he believed I didn't know about. That account had additional deposits that didn't originate from our joint accounts. Deposits from the showroom's business account. Deposits that corresponded to commission payments Nathan should have reported as income, but had instead diverted into his personal concealed account, evading taxes on approximately $80,000 of unreported earnings over 3 years. This is tax fraud, Andrea explained during one of our meetings at Julia's office. Your husband has been systematically underreporting his income to avoid taxation, while simultaneously stealing from joint marital assets. The IRS will be very interested in this information. Additionally, his employer will probably terminate him immediately once they discover he's been diverting commissions that should have been processed through proper payroll channels. This goes considerably beyond typical marital infidelity. Your husband has committed multiple varieties of fraud that will have repercussions extending far beyond your divorce. Julia was practically gleeful. We're going to bury him, she stated. By the time we're finished, Nathan will be fortunate if he avoids prison time, let alone retains any assets from this marriage. But we're not filing yet. I want additional evidence. I want photographic documentation of the affair. I want witness statements from individuals who observed his conduct at that celebration. I want every possible piece of evidence assembled before we serve him. Papers so he has no opportunity to conceal or destroy anything. The private investigator Julia recommended was a former police detective named Marcus Chen, who specialized in documenting extramarital affairs for divorce proceedings. Marcus spent 3 weeks surveilling Nathan and Victoria, photographing their meetings at the Grandview Plaza twice weekly, documenting their lunch appointments at expensive restaurants, capturing images of them together that left no uncertainty about the nature of their relationship. The photographs were damning. Nathan and Victoria embracing outside hotel rooms. Nathan and Victoria kissing in parking structures. Nathan and Victoria behaving like a couple who believed their affair was completely private and would never face consequences. Marcus also interviewed several individuals who had attended the showroom celebration where Nathan had abandoned me. He obtained written statements from 5 separate witnesses describing exactly what they had observed that evening, including detailed accounts of Nathan hurling his wallet at me and departing with Victoria while I remained behind, visibly distressed and humiliated. These statements would be invaluable in demonstrating Nathan's conduct to a judge who might otherwise dismiss the celebration incident as exaggeration or misunderstanding. By mid-December, Approximately 7 weeks after that catastrophic celebration, we possessed everything Julia needed to file. The forged authorization forms demonstrating bank fraud, the forensic accounting documenting systematic theft of marital assets, the evidence of unreported income and tax evasion, the photographs documenting the affair, the witness statements describing Nathan's public humiliation of me, everything assembled into a legal filing so comprehensive and damaging that Julia actually hesitated before submitting it. "This will destroy him," she stated, not as warning but as verification. "Once we file this, there's no reversing course. He'll lose everything. His employment, his assets, potentially his freedom if prosecutors decide to pursue criminal charges. Are you certain this is how you desire to proceed?" I thought about Nathan hurling his wallet at me. I thought about him systematically stealing from our children's future to finance his affair. I thought about 17 years of marriage he had discarded so casually. "Yes," I stated. "I'm certain. We filed on December 15th. Nathan was served papers at the showroom by a process server who arrived during business hours when Nathan's associates and customers were present. This wasn't accidental. Julia had deliberately timed the service to maximize Nathan's humiliation, to create the identical variety of public embarrassment he had generated for me at that celebration. The filing included everything: divorce petition citing adultery and dissipation of marital assets, emergency motions for temporary exclusive possession of the marital residence and immediate access to all financial accounts, documentation of the forged signatures and concealed accounts and unreported income, copies of Andrea's forensic accounting report, everything. Additionally, Julia had simultaneously forwarded copies of relevant documentation to the IRS, to Nathan's employer, and to the district attorney's office with a letter suggesting they might desire to investigate potential criminal violations. We weren't merely pursuing divorce. We were pursuing comprehensive demolition of everything Nathan had constructed through deception. Nathan contacted me 4 hours after being served. His voice on the phone was something I had never heard before. Panic, barely controlled. "What the fuck did you do?" He's not asking. He's nearly screaming. "You sent this shit to my boss? To the goddamn IRS? Are you trying to ruin my life?" I remained silent, permitting him to continue. "You forged my signature, Nathan," I stated finally, my voice completely calm. "You stole nearly $200,000 from accounts that were supposed to secure our children's education. You evaded taxes on unreported income. You committed actual crimes, not merely betrayed our marriage. This isn't me ruining your life. This is you experiencing consequences for your choices." "I'm not discussing this with you," Nathan stated, his voice transforming from panic to anger. "Talk to my lawyer if you desire to communicate." Then he disconnected. I never spoke to him directly again. Everything after that point occurred through attorneys and court filings and official documentation. Nathan hired a lawyer, obviously, but his position was catastrophically weak from the beginning. You cannot defend forged signatures captured on bank documents. You cannot rationalize stealing marital assets to finance an affair. You cannot dismiss tax evasion when the evidence is thoroughly documented. Nathan's attorney attempted negotiation, suggesting reduced settlements and attempting to persuade Julia that pursuing criminal charges was excessive and vindictive. Julia rejected every offer. We proceeded to trial in March, 4 months after filing. The trial itself was remarkably brief because Nathan possessed no effective defense. Andrea testified about the forensic accounting, presenting clear documentation of every fraudulent transfer and every instance of unreported income. Marcus testified about surveilling Nathan and Victoria, presenting the photographs that left no uncertainty about their relationship. The bank representative testified about the forged authorization forms. The witnesses from the celebration testified about observing Nathan abandon me in humiliating fashion. And I testified about everything: the systematic exclusion from Nathan's professional existence, the degradation of being introduced as someone who handles bookkeeping, the discovery of the affair and the concealed accounts and the forged signatures. I testified for approximately 6 hours across 2 days, responding to questions from both attorneys, presenting the narrative of a marriage destroyed not by typical incompatibility, but by deliberate fraud and betrayal. Nathan sat at the defense table throughout my testimony, his expression shifting between anger and resignation. Victoria sat in the gallery behind him for the initial day, but didn't return afterward, apparently deciding that supporting her affair partner through his fraud trial wasn't worth the public scrutiny. Nathan's attorney attempted to portray me as vindictive, as someone weaponizing the legal system to punish her husband for an affair, rather than merely pursuing divorce. This narrative might have been effective if Nathan hadn't committed actual crimes. But the forged signatures and tax evasion and systematic theft weren't disputable. Those were facts, documented and confirmed by multiple sources. The judge's ruling, when it arrived 2 weeks after trial concluded, was comprehensive and devastating. The divorce was granted on grounds of adultery and fraud. I received exclusive possession of the marital residence. I received complete custody of Sophie and Marcus, with Nathan granted only supervised visitation pending completion of family counseling. I received 85% of all marital assets, including Nathan's pension and retirement accounts. Nathan was ordered to reimburse the complete $198,000 he had stolen, plus interest, plus my legal fees, which totaled approximately $60,000. Additionally, the judge's ruling included language explicitly condemning Nathan's conduct, describing his behavior as demonstrating moral bankruptcy and calculated cruelty that warranted the court's strongest disapproval. But the civil ruling was merely the beginning. The district attorney's office had been investigating concurrently with the divorce proceedings, examining the identical evidence Julia had provided them. 2 weeks after the divorce judgment, criminal charges were filed. Bank fraud for the forged signatures, tax evasion for the unreported income. The prosecution offered Nathan a plea arrangement. Plead guilty to reduce charges, accept probation and restitution requirements, avoid prison time. Nathan's attorney advised accepting. The evidence was overwhelming. The conviction was essentially certain, and proceeding to trial risked considerably harsher penalties. Nathan accepted the plea. He pleaded guilty to criminal fraud and tax evasion, received 3 years probation, was ordered to pay substantial fines and penalties, and gained a permanent criminal record that would follow him for the remainder of his existence. His employer terminated him immediately following the guilty plea, citing the criminal conviction and the discovery that he had been diverting commission payments. His professional reputation in the luxury automotive industry was destroyed. Nobody wants to purchase $70,000 vehicles from someone convicted of fraud. Victoria terminated their relationship shortly after the criminal charges were filed, apparently deciding that Nathan was no longer the appealing prospect she had imagined when he had appeared successful and charming. She released a statement through her attorney asserting she had been unaware of Nathan's marital status when their relationship commenced, a claim that was obviously false based on the timeline, but that permitted her to distance herself from the scandal without appearing complicit. Nathan moved into a modest apartment in a considerably less affluent neighborhood, commenced working at an ordinary automotive dealership selling used vehicles for a fraction of his previous commissions, and essentially disappeared from the social circles he had cultivated throughout his career. I heard occasional updates through mutual acquaintances, people informing me they had encountered Nathan and he appeared diminished somehow, less assured than the charming salesman who had once convinced wealthy clients they required another luxury vehicle. I felt no sympathy. The complete process, from that catastrophic celebration to the finalized divorce and criminal conviction, required approximately 8 months. 8 months during which I had methodically dismantled Nathan's existence with the identical precision I employed analyzing failing businesses for my clients. The comparison wasn't accidental. Nathan had become a failing enterprise, sustained by fraud and deception, and I had merely performed the analysis necessary to demonstrate why closure was the only reasonable option. My consulting practice grew throughout this period, partially because the publicity surrounding the divorce attracted attention from other women experiencing similar situations, partially because I had demonstrated precisely how effective thorough financial investigation could be in divorce proceedings. Commenced receiving inquiries from women who suspected their husbands were concealing assets or diverting funds or sustaining secret accounts. They desired the identical comprehensive analysis I had performed on my own marriage, the identical systematic documentation that had demolished Nathan's position so completely. I hired additional staff to manage the increasing workload. I developed specialized services, concentrating specifically on financial investigation for divorce cases. I collaborated with attorneys throughout the region who required forensic accounting expertise for their clients. Within 6 months, this division of my practice was generating more revenue than my original consulting work with businesses. I had accidentally discovered a specialty that addressed genuine need while permitting me to employ my skills toward assisting people escape situations similar to what I had experienced. Sophie and Marcus adjusted to the new circumstances gradually. The initial months were difficult, obviously. They had lost the illusion of an intact family, had observed their father's public disgrace. had needed to process information about affairs and fraud that children shouldn't need to comprehend. But children are remarkably adaptable when provided with stability and honesty. I explained everything to them in age-appropriate manner. I didn't vilify Nathan, but I didn't protect him from responsibility for his choices either. I clarified that their father had made decisions that violated our family's trust and had legal consequences. That those consequences were results of his actions, not vindictive punishment I had imposed. Sophie especially appeared to comprehend this distinction. One evening, approximately 6 months after everything finalized, she inquired if I regretted how aggressively I had pursued the case against her father. "I don't regret demanding accountability for actual crimes," I informed her. "Your father didn't just betray our marriage. He committed fraud that could have destroyed our family's financial security. He stole money that was intended for your and Marcus's education. Those actions merited consequences, and accepting less than complete accountability would have communicated that such behavior is tolerable." Sophie nodded slowly. "Some of my friends say you were too harsh on Dad, that you should have just divorced him quietly, without getting him arrested. What do you think?" I inquired. "I think if someone commits crimes, they should face consequences regardless of their relationship to you," Sophie stated. "And I think you demonstrated to me and Marcus that self-respect matters more than maintaining appearances. That mattered to me more than any settlement amount or custody arrangement." My children had observed their mother refuse to accept mistreatment, had witnessed accountability enforced even when it was difficult and socially uncomfortable, had learned that dignity is not negotiable. That lesson would benefit them considerably more than preserving the fiction of an intact family sustained by deception. The car keys, that wallet Nathan had hurled at me in that parking structure, I kept it. Not from sentiment, but as reminder. Julia had suggested retaining it as potential evidence, though we ultimately didn't require it during proceedings because we possessed considerably more substantial documentation. After everything concluded, I had the wallet professionally framed with a small placard describing the date and location where Nathan had discarded me for another woman. I positioned the frame on the wall in my office where I met with clients. It became a conversation initiator, a physical representation of the moment when humiliation can transform into determination. Women who came to my office experiencing their own betrayals would notice the framed wallet and inquire about it. I would describe that evening at the celebration, the public abandonment, the wallet hurled at my chest, the assumption I would be too mortified to respond effectively, and then I would describe what occurred afterward, the investigation, the documentation, the systematic demolition of everything Nathan had constructed through fraud, the criminal conviction, the complete accountability. These women would listen with expressions transforming from defeat to possibility. "You did all that?" they would ask, almost disbelieving. "I did," I would respond, "and with proper planning and thorough documentation, you can ensure your situation concludes with comparable accountability." The wallet became a symbol of transformation, from victim to advocate, from humiliation to power, from acceptance to refusal. 1 year after that catastrophic celebration, I hosted a small gathering at my residence. Julia attended, along with Andrea and Marcus, and several of the women whose divorce cases I had assisted throughout the previous months. We drank wine and shared accounts about the past year, about marriages concluded and new chapters commenced, about discovering that survival after betrayal is not merely possible, but can actually lead to stronger foundations than what existed before. Sophie joined us briefly before heading upstairs to her room. She had evolved throughout that year, becoming more confident and assertive, less willing to accept dismissive treatment from anyone. She was dating someone recently, a boy from her school who treated her with obvious respect and consideration. I had observed them together, had noticed how he listened when she spoke, and valued her opinions and never attempted to diminish her intelligence or accomplishments. She had learned what a healthy relationship resembles, partially from observing what it doesn't resemble in her parents' marriage. That knowledge would protect her from squandering years on someone undeserving, the manner I had. As the evening concluded and guests were departing, Julia paused at the entrance. "You know what the most satisfying aspect of your case was?" she inquired. "Not merely that we won, though that was obviously gratifying, but that you transformed something devastating into something meaningful. You could have merely divorced him quietly and proceeded with your existence. Instead, you ensured he faced comprehensive accountability, and then constructed an entire practice around assisting other women do the same. That matters considerably more than any individual case outcome." I hadn't considered it in precisely those terms, but Julia was correct. The divorce could have been merely personal tragedy, another failed marriage joining the statistics. Instead, it had become catalyst for transformation. For myself, obviously, but also for the expanding number of women who sought my services and discovered that thorough investigation could reveal truths their partners had assumed would remain concealed eternally. Nathan had believed hurling his wallet at me was demonstration of power, evidence that he had moved on to someone superior, and I was no longer relevant to his existence. What he had actually accomplished was provide me with the motivation to examine everything with the identical precision I employed in my professional work. And that examination had revealed fraud so comprehensive, deception so systematic, that it had demolished not merely our marriage, but Nathan's entire existence. The framed wallet remained on my office wall, silent reminder that the moment someone demonstrates contempt is the moment you commence documenting everything, because individuals who act with that degree of arrogance inevitably leave evidence trails that will destroy them if you comprehend where to search. Nathan had assumed I was too humiliated to respond effectively. He had assumed wrong, and that assumption had cost him everything. By the time 18 months had passed since that catastrophic celebration, my practice had evolved into something I had never initially envisioned, but that clearly addressed significant need. I now offered comprehensive financial investigation and asset protection services for women navigating divorce, particularly in situations involving fraud, concealed assets, or financial abuse. We had assisted clients throughout New York and expanded into New Jersey and Connecticut, constructing reputation for thoroughness, discretion, and aggressive advocacy when circumstances warranted it. I hired 3 additional financial analysts who specialized in forensic accounting. I brought on a private investigator named Robert Sullivan, who had spent 16 years with the New York State Police Financial Crimes Unit before retiring and establishing his own practice. Robert was exceptional at uncovering concealed accounts and tracking asset transfers that individuals believed were too sophisticated to be discovered. We formalized these services under new division of my consulting practice. I developed systems and protocols that could be replicated and scaled as demand continued expanding. Andrea Thornhill joined as permanent consultant, dividing her time between providing expert witness testimony in cases that went to court and training my staff on advanced forensic accounting techniques. The work was demanding. It required managing the emotional intensity of clients who were experiencing profound betrayal while maintaining the analytical detachment necessary to construct legally defensible cases. But it was also the most meaningful work I had ever accomplished. I could observe direct impact in real time. Women who had been financially devastated by dishonest spouses gradually rebuilding security and confidence. Children whose education funds were recovered through our investigations. Families who avoided poverty because we identified and halted fraudulent transfers before they could be completed. Every morning when I arrived at my office, I observed those framed wallet on the wall, and I remembered the lesson I had learned and now taught to others. The moment someone treats you as disposable is the moment you begin documenting everything, because individuals who act with that degree of contempt inevitably leave trails of evidence that will destroy them if you comprehend where to search. Nathan had believed hurling his wallet at me was assertion of power, demonstration that he had discovered someone superior, and I was no longer necessary to his existence. What he had actually accomplished was provide me with physical evidence of his contempt, evidence I had employed to construct case that systematically dismantled not merely his existence, but also exposed operation that had victimized multiple families. In attempting to dispose of me, Nathan had inadvertently created something far more powerful than the marriage he destroyed. He had created professional practice dedicated to assisting women refused to be disposed of, a network of support for individuals experiencing financial fraud within their marriages, a legacy of accountability that extended far beyond my personal circumstances. That legacy mattered more than any relationship based on performed partnership, rather than genuine respect. I had found my own way home, and in accomplishing so, I had constructed something that would assist countless others discover theirs. This account of financial justice and reclaimed dignity had you engaged? Hit that like button now. My favorite moment was when Diana discovered the forged bank signature and realized Nathan had committed actual fraud. What was your favorite moment? Drop your favorite scene in the comments below. Don't overlook more powerful accounts of individuals who refuse to accept betrayal quietly. Subscribe and hit that notification bell.